You're listening to Media Savvy Moms with Melody and Marilyn, a podcast by Parents Aware, your go-to for information on how to talk to kids and teens about pornography and healthy sexuality. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Media Savvy Moms. Today, we have a fabulous guest with us, and we are going to tackle an important topic. We're always talking about building those connections with our children and how that is the foundation of protecting them from pornography. And today, we're going to talk about some really fun ways to build those connections with our kids by adventuring together. And we have with us Greta Eskridge, who is a mother, home educator, and a writer. She travels around the US speaking and sharing her message about joyful, connected parenting. She lives in sunny Southern California with her artist husband, her 4 kids, and she loves reading, making art, and being outside as much as possible. Her first book, Adventuring Together, was recently published this year. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Marilyn and Greta for the interview.
You are a return guest on our show. This is very exciting for us, and we hope it's kind of exciting for you too.
It is.
We had like an emergency meeting with you several months ago because the world locked down and we were in this virtual school thing for the first time, and you walked us and talked us through it so calmly. And we never expected that when we got you back here, many months later, we'd still be feeling the same kinds of stress in our life. But you are a homeschooler or you a home educator, and I just want to know, how has that impacted your family these last few months?
Oh gosh, it's been a whirlwind, hasn't it? I actually was just talking about the fallout of COVID and being on lockdown and our schedule changing and just basically our whole world getting turned upside down, and how I expected that by September it wouldn't be like that anymore. I met with my group of mom friends that we homeschool together. We're a homeschool group that we've been together for 12 years, and every year, in August we plan out our adventures. We adventure together weekly. We surely didn't expect that by September, when we get together to plan out the whole rest of the year, or the whole new year rather, that we would still be facing all of the things that are happening with a global pandemic, that it would still be going on. And I was really frustrated, to be honest. I was disappointed, and I felt like this isn't what I was expecting. But it was such a great opportunity for me, once I worked through my frustration, to say, okay, well, how can we be creative? How can we choose to thrive in this time instead of just survive? Because I think that the temptation is to just say we're just surviving, but we can, with some hard work, and maybe some missteps along the way, we can thrive in the middle of it and in the midst of it. And that's what we've been trying to do as a family. Uh, it hasn't been easy. Sometimes like I said, there's been missteps, but there have also been moments of really great joy.
That's wonderful to hear. And you always evoke this feeling of joy in the posts that you read. Like you give us serious moments of your life too. Because Greta's on Instagram, and you can kind of follow along her adventures and her family life if you'd like there. But we're going to get into the book in a minute, but I love what you said about thriving instead of just surviving, and that's kind of a theme that you have, the lessons that you learn even through those difficult times. But I'm glad to hear there's some silver linings for you, and that and I'm also happy to hear that it's real for you too, that you get frustrated
Oh
just
yeah.
along with us.
I sure do. I mean, when the pandemic first started, like we were like, okay, well, this will be like for a month. Okay, this will be like 2 months, but surely by summer it'll be like back to normal. And then, as each thing that as a family or as individuals we were anticipating and looking forward to, like as we watched them be canceled one by one. And they were some big things. Like my husband and my two older sons were going to go on this 12-day backpacking trip in the Rocky Mountains that they'd been training for and prepping for a year. And we were holding out hope that it wouldn't be canceled, and it was canceled. And then like a family camp that we go to every year. That's like probably one of our most anticipated events as a family, canceled. And to allow ourselves like the time to mourn it and to say, we're ticked off. Like we did not want that to be canceled and we're frustrated. But then after we acknowledged our feelings and said it's okay to be upset, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be mad, but what are we going to do with it? Because the thing is, we don't want to sit in that and stay there. Like, well, what can we do now with the time that we have? For us, we were able to take a family road trip. And that's something we never could have done before because my husband's work schedule didn't allow it. And our summer routine was too busy and too full, but now our summer routine was totally empty. So, and Aaron, my husband, could work remotely. And so we were able to go on a road trip and visit national parks in the West. And it was amazing. And we never would have done that otherwise. So there has been a silver lining. It didn't come without a cost, but there has been beauty in the middle of what has felt like ashes at some points.
Sure. Not what we expected, but we still have moments to celebrate. And
Yeah.
you have a fantastic moment to celebrate because through that, you got your book published, which is Adventuring Together. Give me the subtitle, give me the full title.
Okay, I have to look at it.
You have to look at it too. Good.
Because I always forget the subtitle. Adventuring Together, How to Create Connections and Make Lasting Memories with Your Kids.
Okay, so tell us about the inspiration you had for writing this. What makes you such an expert on adventure, Greta? And really what we want to know is why is this just so important to our family relationships? So maybe I've asked you too many questions at once.
I'll try to cover it all succinctly, which is not my gift, but I'll try. So the inspiration for the book came about really years and years ago when I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And I was just deep in the throes of, motherhood with little kids. And I realized that I wanted like a deep connection with my kids, one that would be happening like in the moment while we were, doing day-to-day little kid stuff, but also one that would span the test of time. Because every time I went to the grocery store, I would see these, well-meaning people who would tell me, oh, look at how beautiful your kids are. They're so sweet, but wait till they get to be teenagers, then it's not going to be fun anymore. So hearing that message repeatedly, I thought, how can I make my story different than what they're projecting on me? I don't want it to be that way. So what can I do now to get me to the point when my kids are teenagers that we still like to be together? And then even when they're adults. And what I realized was we needed to spend intentional time together away from our regular routine, away from potty training and nap schedules and sweeping up crumbs and all the things that were my day to day. We needed to step out of that regular routine and do something that brought all of us joy and connected us. And for me and my kids, that was adventure. So that was the inspiration of my life and parenting, and over years of doing that for like I said, we've been doing it now for 12 years. That's really the story of the book.
Okay, so
And
what do you mean by adventures? Give us a little example of what adventure looks like when you first started out with a 3, 5, and 1-year-old. Yeah.
So like I said, it was just stepping outside of that regular routine. So it wasn't these grandiose adventures. I didn't pack everybody up to go hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Like we just went for a walk at a nature center, and it was very small and very doable, but it got us outside of our regular routine and shaking things up a little bit, getting outside of what your schedule and in your own backyard or what you do normally. It helps you kind of wake up, and it allows you to look around and to look at each other and to really start building connections. And so that to me is what adventure is. It doesn't have to be get on a plane and climb Mount Everest. It can just be strap your kids in the car and drive 2 miles to a nature center and go for a walk together.
So, would you say that it's achieved its goals?
I think so. My kids are 16, 14, 12, and 9.
And you
And
still like to be around each other?
we do. We do. We are deep in the throes of puberty and hormonal ups and downs with the three olders and with me. I'm a middle aged mom. So there's just hormones all over the place. But we still love to be together. We still enjoy spending time together every week, doing some kind of adventure. It's such an integral part of our life and our relationship. And I really believe that is because we've made a point of doing it repeatedly, intentionally over the years.
Okay, so I'm going to throw in something. As I was thinking about you coming onto the show today, my mind went back to a study that was done in the early 80s by a Canadian psychologist called Bruce Alexander. And he did something called Rat Park. Have you ever heard of Rat Park?
No,
No? Okay.
I'm fascinated though.
I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of this.
Okay.
So in that experiment, the experiment started out, they were measuring addiction and how rats would respond to illicit drugs like heroin. So they put a rat in a small cage and they filled one water bottle with pure water and one laced with heroin. And of course, the rat just overdosed on the heroin.
Wow.
And you might think that the study concludes, well, most people thought that the experiment suggested that intense pleasure is by nature addictive. But Alexander, or Bruce Alexander, he thought, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to create a very fun environment for these rats because they're just stuck in this little cage and they're just have no other choice but to find pleasure but to go to the water that's laced with heroin. But what if we put them in a park? What if we gave them things to do? What if we introduced other rats? What if we gave them 20 friends to hang out with? You see where it's going?
Yeah.
What if we gave them like rats of both genders so they could, date and mate as rats do, right? And what they found is that they started to ignore the heroin because they didn't need it. They were fulfilled in other ways. So that I thought
That's
of that.
amazing.
It is
Wow.
amazing. I won't go into it in any more detail than that, but your book made me think of that. It made me think of how important it is that we get our kids into these parks, into these adventures, connecting with those other families that you talked about. And really, I enjoyed reading your book so much. I laughed, I cried. It brought up nostalgic memories of from when my kids were little and what some of the things we had done together. But can you share a moment, either memory or a passage in your book, where there were those connections that you might not have had otherwise that really happened because you're outside with your friends, with your family, doing something outside the norm?
Yeah. That story like literally made me tear up. I teared up over rats. But I think it's such a powerful example of the importance of connection and relationship and not just not being stuck. And I think right now, while we're in the midst of a pandemic and many of us are at home together more than we've ever been before. In fact, when the book release was getting ready to release, I thought, how could this be more inappropriate? It's adventuring together. Like we're not supposed to be with together. We're supposed to be, isolating. We're not supposed to adventure. We're supposed to stay home. But what I realized was actually we need this more right now than ever before because the temptation is to think, well, we're with our family, we're with our kids all the time, like of course we're connected, we're never apart. But connection is so much more than simply being like in the same space together. It actually requires so much more intentionality and thoughtfulness, and even it requires work. And just being in proximity is not true connection. And right now, many of us are in proximity, close proximity with our families all the time. But if we're craving true connection, we need to do something beyond just being in the same room. And I think right now, in addition to the whole pandemic and that proximity issue, is then everybody's on devices,
Hmm.
whether for school or because you've been on a device doing school all day and then you want a break. So you're like, can I just play a video game, or, scroll through TikTok and learn some fun new dances, or this is the only way I can see my friends. And when I wrote the book, like, this wasn't even on my mind. Like, I couldn't have dreamed that this would be where we were when it happened. But I just want to read one section I wrote, because it's so applicable to where we are right now, even though couldn't have imagined it when I wrote it. Um, this is from the first chapter of my book. We live in a day and age where there are so many things vying for our children's attention, and even more for their hearts. There are an endless array of activities to take part in. Maybe that part's not quite so close to home right now, but smartphones to get lost in, text to send, the newest shows to binge watch on Netflix, new apps to explore, the need to keep up with the fun that friends, acquaintances, or even strangers are having, and full schedules for parents and kids alike. All these things can create distance between our hearts and the hearts of our kids. And so I think that's the situation we're in right now. And we are tempted to say, well, we're all together, so
Hmm.
that's enough. We're connected. But really, um, what we need is to step outside, whether literally or figuratively, of, of our everyday routine, and build real life connections. Can I give you an example of how that happened recently for me and my kids?
I'm going to pause you right there, and we are going to come back to that example just after we take a short break. So we'll be right
Okay.
back with Greta and her real life stories.
If you're like us, you probably spend a lot of time worrying about your kids, and especially wondering if they're safe on the digital devices and apps they're using. We have a tool that can help you. It's called the Bark app. That's Bark, B-A-R-K. Bark's logo is a little barking dog, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like a little dog that goes sniffing through your kids' content and looking for danger. It will monitor 24/7 all your kids' content and alert you if there's something dangerous that falls into the categories like drugs and alcohol, violence, sexual content, self-harm, profanity, weapons, or changes to their accounts. If you get an alert, then it will send you a little ping and also suggestions on how to talk to your child about the problem. We have a special 30-day trial for our listeners. You can try out the app and test drive it for 30 days. Just go in, download the app, and at checkout, use the code MEDIASAVVY.
And we're back with Greta Eskridge, author of Adventuring Together. And just before the break, you mentioned those distractions that come into our life, or the fact that we're all together, but we're not really together. And oh my goodness, I feel that so much. I get busy with my work. My kids are half day virtual school, half day with me. And I know that it's just not the most stimulating experience for them right now. And I I look and I think, am I doing enough? Are we connecting enough at this very critical time? So I'm eager to hear what else you have to say, what other advice you have to give us. But you said you have a particular example that you wanted to share.
Yeah, it actually just happened a couple weeks ago when we happened to be out hiking with our family and with some of our friends who we hike together with almost every week. We have been able to start that up again this fall. Many of our activities have been changed or canceled, but hiking we can do. It's outdoors, and we have a core group of friends that we do it with. So um, I'm sharing the story in relation to the idea of getting outside your normal routine and really finding ways to connect. And what happened was we're hiking. We hadn't been hiking together for months, so we were kind of out of practice, and it was a hot day, which normally we would choose not to hike. We would just go to the beach when it was really hot, but we were all so desperate to be on the trail together. We're like, okay, we're doing it. We're going hiking. We're hiking uphill. It's hot. There's no shade. And my 9-year-old was struggling. And I was struggling. And my first inclination would be to say to him, like, listen, it's hard for me too. You can do it. Just, we got to get to the top. It's not going to be over until we get to the top of this hill. So keep going. But thankfully, the Lord reminded me that harshness is never the way to connect to his heart. And so I stopped and I bent down and looked at him eye to eye and said, David, I know this is hard, but I believe in you. I believe you can do it. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to help you. We'll take water breaks. We're going to do it together. And I will be by your side. And he, it wasn't like this magic moment where he just like stood up and was like Superman, like I can do it now because my mom believes in me. We still had to work to get up the hill, and there was still trudging, and it was hard work. But when we finally made it to the top, and I said, babe, you did it. Like, this was hard, but you did it. And he's a funny guy, and he just said to me, he goes, Mom, the Lord gives the weary strength. And and then he just took off and did the rest of the hike on his own and he was fine.
But isn't that beautiful?
Yes.
They're learning this, that they can, it's hard in the moment.
It's so hard in the
Done.
moment.
They know that they did it.
Yes.
Go
And
back to that.
I think for him to know that I was with him through it, that's the connection. That's the connection point. So that he knows, like, in that moment, I'm with him in the hard thing. I do it alongside. I do it with him. I'm saying it's hard, but I'm with you. So that in the future, when much harder things happen in life, he will know my mom is with me. She is standing beside me. She's walking through it. I can trust her. She's on my team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the connection piece that I think happens when we adventure with our kids. We walk through hard things on a micro scale, but it builds like this trust relationship so that when the harder things that happen as our kids grow up come up,
like
they
if
know.
they're struggling with pornography.
Exactly.
They know that mom
Exactly.
can be there.
Yes.
Not going to walk away
Right.
and let them struggle on their own,
Yeah.
but to just walk beside them until they can
Right.
get their own footing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's why we do this, so that we can build that relationship with our kids. They know they can trust us. They know that we're there with them through the good times and the bad times.
Great.
We're together.
I'm going to read a little something from your book. It's page 125.
Okay.
It's easier to have heart-to-heart talks as we walk shoulder to shoulder on the trail. We actually have time to have conversation, a precious commodity in our busy world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Okay, so what does this really look like? What do I need to get started? And what if I'm not a home educator and I don't have, that flexibility that maybe, it's always easier to say, oh, the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah.
It's easy for Greta. This is her life. This is how she does it. Do I have to be a homeschooler to do this? Do I have to wait till COVID is over to get adventuring? What can I do? Or how do you get started?
Oh, I love this. I have to admit, practicality is not my strong point. I'm a visionary, dream big, and we'll figure out the details as we're doing it or later. But I'm so grateful. I had a wonderful editor for my book who said, you need to tell stories in your book because that's what people draws them in. But if you want to keep them, we need to give them some practical advice. So she helped me kind of get out of the clouds and fill my book with some really practical advice. For example, if you're like, well, how do I get started? I have a chapter about starting small and doing things like, instead of starting off with, a wilderness park where you have to worry about, doing a 5 mile hike with your kids amidst mountain lions and rattlesnakes, and your kids have never hiked before, and everybody's going to fall over halfway through and quit. Instead, start with something doable, like a walk in your neighborhood, or find a nature center where there are trails that are marked, and there's a docent to help you if are worried that your kid picked a poisonous plant on the side of the trail.
I tend to recall that your first adventure was not that
Yeah,
successful.
exactly. Yes, because I was like, oh, let's go big or go home. And I started too big, and it was not like this great success. Instead, I needed to start a little more realistically. You don't have to be a homeschooler. In fact, I talk about creating like how do you create a group of people that you could do this with that aren't homeschoolers, and maybe you're worried about trying to adventure alone and you think my kids won't want to go with just me. I'm worried to go by myself. How do I create an adventure club where I have some friends for them and for me, and we can connect together? I talk about how to do that.
I love that you suggest getting together with another family, at least one other family, because I know when I take my kids, if we have an opportunity to go to a pool, like a
Yes.
friend's pool, but there's no other kids there, we're done in 5 minutes. But
Mhm.
if we have just one other child there, we are
Yeah.
there all day. And so when you can get together, like this time where I believe it's so important, especially through adolescence, that
Yes.
kids have face-to-face connections with
Amen.
their peers, and we can't do that indoors without a
Right.
mask on. So
Yeah.
get outside and
Yeah.
let each other see one another's faces. What a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. I actually get a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but I definitely have pushback from parents of teens, because they'll say to me, well, this is great when your kids are little, but what about when they're teens and they don't want to adventure together? How do I do that? And I always say, invite your kids' friends to come. If the way to bring your kid to you is to say, hey buddy, why don't you bring a friend? Why wouldn't we do that? It doesn't negate the time together or the connection simply because somebody from your outside of your family is there. In fact, if that's the way to pull your kid into the adventure, by letting them bring a friend, because that creates kind of a safe buffer for them, do it. All you're doing is you're creating more connection because you're inviting this other child into your family, and you're opening up the opportunity for connection with your own kid when they might be fighting it otherwise. So I'm a big fan of including friends on adventures.
Great. Okay, one last thing before we find out where we can find your book is that you're sitting in California right now in the middle of a heat wave, but Melody and
Yeah,
I are where are we?
I get it.
We've got our sweaters out.
I
So
know. I'm jealous.
winter is upon us soon. Okay, not that soon. We still have a good couple months to go adventuring. Is there anything we can do with adventures that doesn't require us to face the elements as if we were, oh, I don't know. We call them voyageurs here in Canada, where they would just canoe through anything.
I have heard it said that there's no such thing as bad weather, only poor clothing. And there actually is a book it's on my book list of books to read, that actually talks about like adventuring in any kind of weather and what that looks like. I mean, I've never even driven in the snow. Full confession here. I'm terrified of the thought of driving in the snow. Um, but we do have to deal with heat, like I said, like hiking when it's, too hot. Of course, we can just go to the beach. So I'm probably the worst person to ask this question. But because I anticipated there would be readers outside of Southern California, I do have a whole chapter about adventuring together indoors and a chapter on adventuring through books. And I have a list of ideas of things that you can do. I really think it's powerful if you step into an activity that your child loves to do, especially if it's something where they can be kind of like the master or the leader, and you are learning from them or alongside them. So say you have a kid who loves art and you sit down next to them and like, hey, let's do an online art class together today. Because there's so much stuff online right now because people are, having to do things from home. And imagine the excitement your child would feel if you stepped into their world, something that they love to do, and you adventure in that way. You don't have to do that outside. You can be, at home together. Or you say, let's, how you've always wanted to, learn how to make cupcakes from scratch. Today's the day we're going to do it. Those kinds of adventures, they don't fit our normal idea of, mountain climbing as an adventure, but I think that they are real life connections that we can do with our kids inside. And then of course books. I think reading books together they provide wonderful adventures that don't require us to get outside of our own home. And for me, that's a really personal part of my story because growing up, I had a mom who was not like adventurous. She loved being home, but also physically, she was unable to go hiking or bike riding or anything like that. She had physical limitations that prevented her from doing any of those kinds of activities. I never went hiking with my mom, but we read books together. And through those books that I can still remember her reading aloud to us, while we sat on our big brown couch, we adventured all around the world. And I remember those experiences and they impacted me deeply. They were so connecting. So if you think, well, I can't adventure outside with my kids, you can sit down and read a book and you can travel the world together.
That's beautiful. I wish we could go on more adventures with you today, but I'm going to turn the time over to Melody and she's going to give us a little recap of what we've talked about, and then we'll come back to you for a challenge in just a bit.
We love Greta. I'm glad that I was muted over here because I'm laughing, I'm crying, I'm a mess over here. Okay, we're going to give a little recap of what we talked about today. First, we talked about COVID. I love how Greta talked about allowing ourselves the time to mourn. It's okay to be sad, mad, upset at what's going on, but then what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do after that? Taking time to do things that we've never been able to do before and seeing the silver lining and the beauty in the ashes. She says, be creative, thrive just instead of just surviving. Um, then we talked about how the reason that she wrote her book in the first place was because she wanted deep connection. She talked about how those other parents would come out over in the grocery store when she was out with her little kids and say, wait till they're older and then they won't like it anymore, and how she wanted her story to be different. How building these connections can stretch from childhood into teenagehood and even into adulthood. And then they talked about how being in proximity is not necessarily true connection. Connection requires work. And through adventuring, building this connection piece is so important because later when things happen, your kids know that we're on their team. As we do hard things in the micro, they know we can help them with hard things in the macro. And then we finished up with some really great practical advice. Start small, create a group. You can adventure in any weather if you're really brave, or if you want to adventure indoors or adventure through books.
Okay. Now, Greta, I forgot to ask where we can find this book.
You can find it wherever books are sold.
Where do we find you? I should ask that.
You can find me. I'm most active on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time. And you can find me just by searching Greta Eskridge, or you can look for my handle, which is Ma and Pa Modern. I also have articles on my website, which is gretaeskridge.com. I have articles about protecting your kids from pornography and adventuring and a bunch of other stuff that I love. So those are the two places that are best to find me. And then just find my book on Amazon or request it at your local bookstore and see if they'll carry it.
That would be fun. Yes. Okay. So a challenge for us today.
Okay, so I thought about the things that I think pull our kids to us. And I think surprising our kids with something that will delight them is a wonderful way to pull them towards us and to begin to create connections. So my challenge is that this week you will surprise them with something that will bring them joy and delight. So maybe that's planning a hike, or like I said earlier, taking a class together online, or signing up for one in person if that's available where you are. Wake them up early and watch the sunrise together with donuts and hot cocoa, something that's just outside of your ordinary routine that will just surprise them and show them how much you love them and you want to connect with them. And then figure out how you can make a habit of those kinds of adventures. So find something to do that will delight them, and then figure out how you can do it again and again.
Adventure together. Thank you for joining us here today, Greta.
Thanks for having me. It was great to talk to you guys.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Media Savvy Moms podcast. For detailed show notes and links to any of the resources mentioned today, visit parentsaware.info. To connect with us on social media, find us on Instagram at Media Savvy Moms and on Facebook and Twitter at Parents Aware. We would love to get your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Until next week, let's keep talking.